Hi, I'm Delisi. In this episode of Essential Cooking, my co-host, Chef James Rigato, and I sit down with two of his closest friends who also happen to be chefs. Anthony Lombardo, executive chef of Shewolf in Detroit, and John Virmiglio, executive chef of Grey Ghost, also in Detroit. It was a spirited conversation that started by talking about the names of their restaurants. So I thought I would start with a question that people ask me, because I know you guys, and they'll say, how did they get the name of that restaurant? Why did they name their restaurant that name? So, Anthony, we're going to start with you. How did Shewolf get its name?
So Shewolf is Roman and is based on the story of the Shewolf, Romulus and Remus. It's the story, it's Roman mythology, by the way, and it's the story of the founding of Rome. Two young twins, who's Romulus and Remus, and they were abandoned by their parents. Their father was a king. Their father was losing power, and his brother was taking control. And so they put him in a basket, floated him down a river in order to save their lives. They were found on the banks of the Tiber by a she-wolf, a la lupa in Italian. La lupa took the took the little infants. They suckled on the wolf until they became, till they grew up into teenagers.
Story,
and then as they grew, that wolf was their, mother, and they were raised by a she-wolf, and then they went on to found Rome. They battled to the death. Romulus killed Remus and named Rome after himself. Obviously,
so you're Romulus.
Mythology.
Now I know where Ann's going with this, because Anthony and I were driving to New York to do a dinner a few years ago, and he was telling me some restaurant names he had. One of them was the address. I think you mentioned, I'm thinking about. It was like whatever your address is. What?
No. It was 1861 or something, which was like the founding. It's the year that Italy was united.
There we go.
And it's also the year Detroit was founded or something like that.
So and I'm like, that's pretty cool. I like that. There's a lot of restaurants that have numbers in their name. And then I'm like, well, what's the other one? He's like, Shewolf. I was like, Shewolf? That's the best restaurant name I've ever heard in my life. And I, of course, thought of the Megadeth song, and then he obviously tells me about the,
Most people relate it to the Shakira song.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other song. But yeah, when he said I was just like, I feel like almost like, lost control of the car. I was like, that's the greatest restaurant name I've ever heard. And so maybe my enthusiasm, helped him make that decision. But I don't think it would be the same if it was called 18.
Basically, James Regato named Shewolf.
Isn't it true that when before it got announced or something, didn't you put it out there?
Well, he did a takeover at Mabel. So we did a takeover. He did a week-long kind of preview dinner, took over the restaurant. I was out of town. He was passing out swag. He did it right. Anthony was doing some guerrilla restaurant marketing, and there's a good buzz. That's nowadays you got to stand out. He came in town and definitely stood out. So big ups to Anthony in that hustle.
So John Virmiglio from Grey Ghost. How did Grey Ghost get its name?
All right, so we were seeking a historically relevant to the city of Detroit that had a little bit of history to it, but also was still cool sounding, I guess, for lack of any better way to say it. So a lot of research, did a lot of homework at the library up the street, and we came across the Grey Ghost, it's the nickname of the most notorious pirate on the Detroit River during Prohibition. So he's known for his allegiance with the Purple Gang, who also actually contributed to his demise, but he ran rum across the Detroit River and wore a gray coat, gray hat, gray boat, the Grey Ghost. Yeah, so first day we were open, actually, somebody called from the Detroit Yacht Club and said that they had a picture of the Grey Ghost, and he was a huge contributor to the money that allowed them to open that. And I was like, I'd be honored if I could see it, because we don't know what the heck he looks like,
right?
And never heard of him again. Never. That was it. He called and he was like, yeah, come by. I was like, come on, I'll treat you to dinner. Bring the picture. We'll take a little picture with it. And then it was the ghost.
You got ghosted.
It was him.
By the ghost.
For sure. So that's where it came from.
What were the other names in the running? Did you have other, what are the runner-ups, the ones you didn't use?
John's Chop House. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. John by John Virmiglio. My big one was either Mayor Pingree, who was very well regarded.
Mm-hmm.
We were slightly concerned about the political climate. And
right.
clearly we had some foreshadowing, so I'm glad we didn't do that. And then I also was rallying for 3-cent fare, and that's how much it costs for the original Detroit streetcar. And
That's
so at
awesome.
the time they were building the Q line.
Yeah.
Fantastic Q line.
That's not bad.
Shout out Q line.
There you go.
But yeah, so they were using that. So
You
I got
got-
overruled.
You got
Needless to say, I didn't come up with Gray Ghost. Shout out to Chef Joe.
So you didn't come up with Shewolf. You didn't come up with Gray Ghost.
No, I came up with
you
Shewolf.
came up with
I was
Shewolf.
being facetious, making fun of James.
He
Taking
came up
credit
with
for
no,
me.
of course. He was just modest. He was modest about the brilliant name.
People that know the show would know how Mabel Gray got its name, but for people who don't, you should tell that story.
Yeah, so Mabel Gray is a song by a band. The band is called Brown Bird. I'm a big fan of them. I actually made a little art piece, kind of documentary on them. They're a 2-person band, and sadly, Dave Lamb passed away, and now Morgan Eve Swain is the surviving musician. And through loving that song, I looked up Mabel Gray, and Alice Mabel Gray is a woman who lived on the shorelines of Lake Michigan, and she was kind of a forager, nudist, kind of antisocial type. And the townspeople didn't totally understand her, so they would often, call her a witch or folklore, make up stories about her haunting the shoreline. And obviously, after she passed in the early 1900s, that continued on. And so there's a rumor of the ghost of Lake Michigan being Mabel Gray, but I think of her more as the powerful forager, kind of anti-social nudist that she was. So yeah,
All right, there you go.
that's basically me.
I mean, who doesn't forage nude?
yeah, good
well,
question.
there it is. Of course.
If I'm looking for mushrooms,
Anthony, why did you want to cook?
ooh,
What made you want to cook?
desperation.
Needed money.
Needed a job. That's how
Really?
it started. Yeah.
Did you cook? But were you interested in it when you were a kid?
I
Like, what was it like when? What was food like around your house when you were a kid?
Yeah, a lot of food, but I never saw it as a career. But yeah, I was surrounded by Italian food, and Italian American ingredients and gardens, and all that. And I always had a special relationship with food, but I never saw it as a career. I always just loved it. I just liked eating it. I used to cook as far back as I can remember, just the boiling noodles and warming up, sauce that my mom had already made. I would always be able to feed myself since I was 10 years old. One time I put a pizza box in the oven. I put it on preheat. I had the oven on preheat just to keep the pizza warm.
This is last week, by the way.
And yeah, I was probably 10 years. That was the first time my parents left me alone by myself. I don't know how old I was, maybe 7, 8, I don't know. Probably 12.
I did a similar thing with Totino's pizza rolls.
Yeah.
But I actually put them in the toaster oven again, left it alone to my own devices, and
In the
decided.
bag?
No. I took them out of the bag, but then I used the bag to remove the pan from the toaster oven. Melted, burned the heck out of my hand. It was a disaster.
That's a bad one.
Yeah, wow.
That is a bad one.
Yeah, great start to my career.
But what made you want to really make it a career?
Honestly, I saw a cooking show on Food Network.
Really?
So yeah, I'm old enough that
Which
I
one?
was the part of. It was called Cooking School Stories, and it was a 9-part documentary that was following students through their last class of culinary school. And I watched it. I was working at a pizza spot at the time, and I had no intention, just like Chef Anthony, of doing anything with food. Watched the program, was totally enthralled, and I was like, "That's what I'm going to do." And that's the school I went to, and yeah, that's
Wow.
it. Yeah, that's how it happened.
What? Yeah.
And I told my parents, like,
Oh,
"All
yeah.
right,
What did they say about that?
Yeah, they
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
They made me go to Michigan State my freshman year because they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, you don't cook at all." And so it was totally out of left field. I mean, we were all in love with watching Food Network and stuff. Obviously,
Right.
This was the beginning of the rise of the craziness of food culture. And they were like, "I think you should probably stay because it's a private school. It costs a ton of money." And
Right.
I was just like, one day, like, I'm going to be a chef. So, which was a veering off the road of being an architect, which I was terrible at. So
So wait a second. Architect first, then chef.
I took an architectural class, and I realized that was never going to come true when I I laid out the plans for my house, and the teacher gave me a terrible grade, and I was like, what happened? The first story and the second story did not line up at all. And I was like, I think that's over. I think that dream is over. It was good.
Oh, my God.
And what about you?
Yeah, for me, I never really did much else. I mean, I kind of grew up, I wanted to get a job to make money for sure. So I was, on my 14th birthday, started washing dishes. And I loved it. So I worked, in food because it was an easy job for a young teen. And then honestly, by the time I was about 16, I got really good at line cooking, and I was making a pretty solid wage. And then same thing, 17, kind of as every year that went by, I could make a little more, and moved out. And then I went to Schoolcraft. I was actually lucky to work around some chefs that were in Schoolcraft when I was line cooking. So I was kind of like on the fence of, I think I like this, I'm going to take it seriously. And I had the two best cooks in the kitchen were Schoolcraft, kids. So they were like, yo, you gotta check out Schoolcraft. You'll love it. So I did, and then I was enrolled pretty young, and so I was cooking no matter what for money, but then came across the right people to kind of talk me into Schoolcraft, because I really didn't. I mean, I went to Howell High. I didn't really know about big restaurants, or I wasn't super exposed to the city, and then Schoolcraft. So that got on my radar, and then it was game over. I mean, I graduated from Schoolcraft when I was 20. I was like a year young for high school, and then I just didn't stop.
So let me ask you this. What surprised you, Anthony, the most when you got to culinary school? That you were like, I mean, you must have had some notion of what you thought it was going to be, and then what it really was. I
had no intent. I was like almost forced to go by I had a very good, we worked on the line together. His name is Chad Browse. Phenomenal chef. I'll give a little shout out to Chad. He's now the current director of research and development to Chipotle. He's the only person he answers to at Chipotle is the president CEO.
Wow.
He's worked at restaurants per se, El Bulli in Spain. His resume is deep. We started at Lou and Carl's in Brighton together making quesadillas. I had no aspirations for college. I graduated high school with a 1.7 GPA and never took any ACTs or LSATs or whatever. I don't even know the acronym or whatever. I never took any of them.
No ACT, no SAT for you.
No.
So when you got to culinary school, was it like a little bit of culture shock when you got there?
It was culture shock. Moving away from Michigan, I went to CIA in Hyde Park, New York, and they accepted me based on. They didn't look at any high school transcripts or anything. They gave you their own standardized test, and they required 6 months of work experience and interviews and a letter of recommendation from an alumni, which I had. And I was like in Willy Wonka's land of, whatever that. I've never even seen that movie. But it was surrounded by food. I loved food, and everything was food related. The library, every park. It was an intense experience, and so I graduated from there with like a 3.9 GPA and perfect attendance.
Wow.
So once you find it,
then you're good to go.
Then it's full speed ahead.
When you're in culinary school, do you eat 3 meals a day, and does everybody cook for each other?
Yeah,
how do you eat? Where do you get the food from?
We had a cafeteria.
Yeah, but that's that top dollar school he's talking about. So they get like they get like handkerchiefs they wear. Like you guys you wore a handkerchief.
We had handkerchiefs. Yeah. You had to have a crisp white chef coat. You had to shave. You had a code of conduct you had to adhere to. If you got kicked out of school, you still had to reimburse your tuition. It was pretty strict. It was old school French brigade system.
Right.
Culinary school.
I went to like community college, so like there was a cafeteria, and like I don't even know where it was at. I just I ate like granola bars and Tim Hortons.
So
yeah,
we were in the same boat as you guys. Johnson Wales actually is the culinary school that trains all the armed forces.
Yeah.
So they were real onto that stuff. We had to have a perfectly ironed T in the back of our chef coat, and yeah, that was like the biggest stress for me out there trying to keep those uniforms looking crisp. And I used to wear it all day. I thought I was the coolest guy ever. I'd be like, get out of school at 1 o'clock, and at like 9 p.m., I'm still fully in there, get the neckerchief on, full slot. I could jump in action at any moment, but really I've just been playing video games for like 6 hours. So, yeah.
I remember one time, Chef Dan came into class, and I had my shirt off. I was showing someone my first tattoo, and my shirt was off. And like the chef's just like, It's just, I think I put it back on so fast he didn't have to say much, but I was like, it was definitely not a handkerchief kind of environment.
You would have got kicked out of class.
Oh, no, for sure.
If your chef coat's wrinkly,
yeah,
they boot you get a 0 for the day, and then you're behind.
Did you get a chance to come back? We would get 15 minutes. So if you could get out of there, go back, either iron your jacket or get a new one, and get back in 15 minutes, you were good. If not,
sounds very stressful.
It's good, but I really... I like the discipline. I needed it at the time in my life.
Yeah.
The discipline probably saved me.
So I wanted to ask you guys about traveling to Italy and what we think we know, what it's really like, how the food is different. I want to talk about that a little bit. So, Anthony, you lived there for a while, right?
I did live there, yep.
Where did you live?
I lived in 8 different regions, and I traveled to all 21 regions over the course of about 30 months. And so, I lived and worked in 8 different regions across that span. So I would move periodically to make sure I got a grasp of everything.
So you went there to learn?
Oh, yeah. I went there on a scholarship to a cooking school set up by the Slow Food Foundation. Mm-hmm. It was a scholarship that I won, and I was able to go there. It came attached with a visa for a certain amount of time. So I went to a school that was based on regional Italian cooking, so one stationary in the city of Iesi in Le Marche, and chefs would come from every region, show you their dishes, and then after that, you set up internships, you network, you meet chefs, go work in restaurants, often unpaid, so you have to be very, careful with your money, and it was a different world. The first time I ever left the United States, period, I thought that I spoke Italian when I got there. I was not accurate in that.
How did that go over when you started talking or trying to speak Italian?
Yeah, it was way too fast. Everybody's talking. I was like, everybody needs to slow down. And why don't I understand any of these words? Turns out I knew a lot more dialect than I did Italian, But I caught on quick. Had no choice. I was in small towns. I wasn't like in big cities where the English was prevalent.
Right.
And it was before Google Translate, so I had a dictionary.
Did you like it there? Did you think you could live there?
I didn't. After 3 years, I was ready to. I was, calling it quits.
Are you ready to come home?
Yeah, I did love it, but I didn't think I could make my life there.
Yeah.
And I had the whole thing. I had a girlfriend. I had a job lined up. But I couldn't. It was hard to advance in our world. How hard we work. You need to be able to see some. Upward mobility. It was hard to see there.
Interesting.
And forget about opening a restaurant.
Not going to happen.
Whew. In Italy?
It's tough with property and a lot. There's it's kind of like it's not like as easy to open a building and just buy something and get a partner and go for it like it is here.
Really?
Yeah.
That's different. John, have you been there?
Yeah. Yep.
And where were you and what did you think when you were there?
Incredible. I was in Florence and Bologna. So
and did you go to there to cook or you went?
I was there competing on a reality cooking show.
And?
Pretty cool. No big deal. I'm on IMDb as an actor now.
No.
It was on Bravo. We filmed in 2011, and it aired in 2012 for one season, which is unfortunate. I think they realized that I couldn't be on the second season, so they just called it. They're like, well, without John, we don't have a show, so this is over. But yeah, so we traveled around the world. It's called Around the World in 80 Plates. If you come to Gregos, you can ask any one of my employees, because I remind them on a daily basis that I am a celebrity. Nobody remembers the name. I remember we went to New York for the end of it. I won't tell you the ending because for $2 an episode, $20 total, you can watch it yourself on Amazon. But we went to New York right before the final episode aired, and there was a select few of us from the cast, and I was walking around with one of them, my buddy Chef Nookie. That was his name, Nookie. And somebody came up to us on the street, and they were like, "Oh, my God, you're that guy from TV." Totally talking to Nookie. I was standing right next to him. Nothing. He was like, he was on the show. She goes, oh yeah. I was like, so that's when I realized I didn't make any headway in my quest to be a celebrity.
No celebrity chef for you.
No celebrity chef. But yeah, so we went there. I won a challenge making tortellinis, which was incredible. in Bologna with the traditional stuffing, mortadella and prosciutto. Killed it. Won $5,000. Bought a car. But we got to stay in a Tuscan villa, and we were in 2 teams, one team, in each villa, and we battled it out, and we had to cook food that was indigenous to the area, and then the locals would actually sit down and eat it, and then they would be the ones who would vote who won and who lost, and then there was survival-style exit. You don't mess with Italian food. You don't. There's no reinterpretation. There's no like, I did this with this. Like, you don't. I learned that really fast. They were like, what wild boar ragu with gnocchi? What are you doing? And I was like, I'm sorry. But it honestly, like, they gave us 24 hours to cook. They gave us the most incredible pantry of produce. Like, still to this day, it's the most blown away I've been by walking into a kitchen. And it was a tiny little thing, and I spilled a whole 40-gallon stock pot of ribollita.
Spilled it?
Spilled it. Yep. They gave us 24
pounds?
hours for the challenge, and we felt like we needed to use it because we didn't want them to come back later and be like, oh, you didn't use the challenge properly. So I was like, all right, we got to do something. So I was the last shift. It was 3 a.m, literally nothing to do but put this soup away. It was on a shelf over the stove. The shelf was not attached to the brackets.
Oh
Right.
My God.
And there was 2 pots, one on either side, and it was the old classic teeter-totter. and it launched everywhere. And it's 3 a.m. There's no cameras, no nothing. It's just me. And I'm like, and this is ribollita, which by definition means reboil, which by definition means you need to make it beforehand so that you can reboil it so that it gets to it. So now I'm like, challenges in 10 hours, and I just spilled this whole thing. So I went and woke up my teammates.
This is very stressful to listen to.
Yeah, I thought I was
going
to
to
get kicked out. I thought I was like, this is it. I'm done. So I went and woke up my teammates, and I told them what happened, and then I cleaned the whole thing up. We finished the challenge, whatever. Didn't get kicked out. Spoiler alert. And we were about to leave. We had just cleaned this whole villa. The chef was so happy. It was not the cleanest thing I've ever seen, but we left it sparkling. And then the production team came in and said, you need to recreate that. And I had to do it again.
Oh, my gosh.
And you had to spill it on camera?
On camera. Yeah, they're like, we missed it. We need it. So that was my first acting on there, and it was terrible.
That's
so if you see that, yeah.
They made you spill it.
Yes,
this is going to be the 20 best dollars I ever spent on Amazon.
Yeah, no
Oh,
kidding.
yeah. For sure. $2 an episode.
I've known you
You're
for a
gonna
while now.
love it.
I did not know that story.
This is a great
At
story.
least buy the Italian episode.
Yeah. So that was embarrassing. People still bring me containers of white beans because I had 3 or 4 incidents over the episodes with beans.
Our thanks to Chef Anthony Lombardo and Chef John Virmiglio for talking with us, and to you for listening.
We would like to thank La Marca Prosecco for their support. From the hills of Veneto, Italy, you can never go wrong with Prosecco, whether it's in a spritz or drinking straight.
Joan Isabella is our executive producer. Associate producers are Lisa Brancato and David Lyons. Production provided by Studios on the Pond and Rowan Nemisto. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. This is a production of Detroit Public Radio Station, WDET.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and join us as we explore the world of food and how to cook it right here on Essential Cooking.